Hey guys, so I want to talk a little bit about naming of muscles. So some of these names you see latissimus dorsi and you see sternocleidomastoid, you see flexor, extensor, digitorum, and all these crazy long names. I think if you understand why they're named that way and the rules they use to name muscles, it'll make the names of the muscles not seem so crazy and also help you to remember where they're located. So there is a science behind this. So just to kind of look at some of these, so a lot of diagrams that you see of muscles, you'll see superficial muscles and then deep muscles because obviously everything in our body is not just one plane, it's depths and things overlap one another. So on both of these diagrams, you can see that the right side is going to be superficial muscles, which are closer to the skin. The left side of the diagram is going to be muscles that are more deep underneath those superficial muscles. So make sure that you're aware of that when you are labeling your diagrams, just because I think it'll be confusing otherwise. If you just have to pay attention to also, are you looking at the anterior side of the body or the posterior side of the body? Is Are you looking at the hand, um, facing, away from you or towards the front of your body, or is it facing the back of your body? So pronation and supination. Um, so there are certain muscles that allow you to have your hand pronated or supinated. And so knowing the orientation of the body is very important as well when you're labeling muscles and knowing what muscle groups you're looking at. So we're going to go through and talk about kind of how they're all named. So some of the muscle naming criteria, there's a lot of them. There are 8, but they kind of go from large groups down to smaller groups of muscles. So most of the muscles in the body are named based on size. So you'll hear things like gluteus maximus. Most of us know that here. That is our butt muscle, the bigger of the two. And then you'll hear like gluteus minimus. So that's the smaller muscle of the two. You hear of latissimus dorsi. That latissimus means coming from the side. So here, that's this muscle right here that comes around the side of our back. And so a lot of times the size is something that is taken into account. And so think about longus is another one. So if it's a very long muscle, or if it's a mini like minimus, things like that, that can tell you a lot about where the muscle is located. The second is shape. So there are basically 3 basic shapes. So you have trapezoid shapes. So the big one for that is the trapezius. So that's what's outlined in black here. It's kind of an elongated rectangle, and the trapezius muscle was named because it has that shape. A triangle shape, so your deltoid muscle. So your deltoid muscles are over here, and they're kind of like triangular shaped. And then you have serratus muscles that are kind of saw-like in shape, so they have kind of like jaggedy edges, and that's how they named those. One that isn't used a ton, but there are 3 muscles in the body that use the number of origins that a muscle has. So remember, the origin is the place that is stationary, the insertion is what is moving. So the biceps brachii has bi, which that Latin root means 2. So biceps have 2 origins. Triceps brachii have 3 origins, and then your quadriceps in your leg have 4 origins. And so it's attaching at 4 different points on muscles. And then another way that it names is by point of origin and insertion. So one of my favorite muscle names, sternocleidomastoid, in this picture here, as you can see. So it's going to be attaching to your sternum. It's also going to be attaching to your clavicle, and then it also attached to your mastoid, the mastoid bone here. That's a part of your jawbone. Another way is orientation of muscle fibers. So think about the directions that muscles are going to be moving throughout the body. So they could go parallel to your midline, they could go transverse or across your midline, or they could be angled. So those are the 3 kind of orientations. So rectus, so your rectus abdominis muscles, so like your ab muscles, they make up, like if you have a 6-pack, those are going to be parallel to your midline. Oblique are going to be angled, and so those are going to be like your oblique muscles that make up like the sides of your abdomen. And then the transverse abdominis, those go they go across your abdomen. And they're all at different layers too, so some are more superficial than others. Another way that is a really nice one to use and to think about how muscles can be opposite of each other. And so a lot of times if you think about the opposite side of the body with these mechanical action of muscles, you'll be able to remember where they are. So like flexors and extensors. So flexors are going to be muscles that are going to be decreasing the angle in that joint that you learned about already in the last activity last week. And extenders are going to be extending that. And so if you think about even if you're in your upper arm, your flexor is going to be on one side of your arm, more anterior, and then your extensors are going to be posterior. Pronators and supinators, like I said, one muscle that's going to allow you to put your hand face up, the other one's that's going to have you put your hand face down. Levators and depressors, so ones that are going to allow you to raise your arm up, or put your arm back down. Rotators, you have to have one so you can like rotate your wrist or rotate your hip or rotate your ankle. And then we have abductors and adductors. So abductors obviously taking away from your midline, adductors bringing them back towards the midline. So all of these muscle groups work together and they're opposites of each other. And so if you can learn, a lot of times they have similar names too. They're just on opposite sides of the limb or of the body. And then another one is name of the muscle's function. So there's not a ton of these. And these are not as intuitive, I think, because you'd have to really understand and know your Latin roots. But masseter, chewing, so like masochist, they call people like masochistic or things like that, like chewing. And then the risorius muscle is one that's used to laugh, but like Resor is like a Latin word for laugh, which most of us wouldn't know that. And then the muscle location, finally. So these are a couple of them that really make sense. So temporalis muscle that you've already learned about this year is on the temporal bone, and then zygomaticus is on the zygomatic bone. So here's just some other things that are helpful as far as like Latin roots and things like that. Like why abductor means to go away from the body, because ab means away, duct means to move. So a muscle that moves away from, or digiti means a digit or a finger. So if it was like if it was an abductor digitus muscle, it would be moving your finger away. And so it was showing you for this example, the abductor digiti minimi. So minimi is tiny. So it's a muscle that moves the little finger or toe away. And then an opposite one would be an adductor, and it would be moving a little finger or toe towards something. So you can kind of break all those things apart and put together what that function of that muscle might be. Here's some other ones. So these might be helpful to you as you're going through and just looking at them. It'll help you to kind of make sense of the function of those muscles and also where they're located. And then let's just practice a few to look at like why they're named the way they are. So biceps femoris. Okay, so let's break that apart first. It has two origins because it has bi at the beginning. And then the femur is one of the origins because femoris is part of that word. So that one's pretty straightforward. What about orbicularis oculi? Well, let's break that apart. Orbs are spheres or circles, and then oculus refers to the eye, and circles, and this circles the eye. So this is the muscle that surrounds your eye that allows you to blink and look in different directions. So obviously you'd have to know what an orb was. You'd have to know kind of history-wise that oculi, oculus usually means something related to the eye. And then one more, extensor digitorum. So this one, an extension, extensor, is extending something, digits, or your fingers. And so it's going to refer to extending your fingers. So they're the things that are going to allow you to, point your finger at someone or something like that. So hopefully this helped you kind of understand why muscles are named why they are named the way that they are, and you don't just think that it's some obscure name that makes no sense and they're just these big words.